As I asked in the House yesterday, back in March, the finance minister said that the budgetary deficit was going to be $40 billion. And in your recent report, you indicated that she was off by more than $6 billion. So why would this be that she was off by such an incredibly large amount?
We based our estimate on information that is known at this time, but there is one big unknown that the minister probably has that information and we don't, and that is the final deficit for the year that ended on March 31st. So we still don't have the public accounts. So based on that incomplete information, we do indeed estimate that the deficit for the current fiscal year will be $46.5 billion, and that's due to slower revenue growth and also higher expenditures. And that's why we think the deficit will be some $6 billion higher than what the minister indicated earlier this year.
Thank you very much for that response. Now, why I see that between the current fiscal year 2022, 2023, and 2028, 2029, expenditures increased significantly. I believe it's an average of $4 billion every year. Why is that, please?
It's due in good part to new programs that have been announced and included in our fiscal projections. So there's a number of programs. I don't have the precise specific list, but we included all the information that was available as of September 15th, including information that was provided to us by the Department of Finance. So it's mostly due to new programs, because existing programs, they tend to cost slightly less than what the government indicated. So it's mostly new spending and new programs being introduced.
That's right. In your report, you say this upward revision is due to new measures. So I was going to ask for you to expand upon those new measures. They're outlined in the report as being those announced in Budget 2023 and through to September 15th. Is there any specifics you would like to mention within those new measures or those new expenditures relative to the deficit increase, please?
Well, the dental program is certainly a significant piece of these new expenditures, and also to a large extent the subsidies for electric vehicle battery plants, even though this will be progressively coming into force as production ramps up at the two plants. So these are two things that come to mind.
Yeah, and I believe my colleague Mr. Lawrence will get further into more of the finance aspects of it. But would you say that reduced expenditures would make us less dependent on nominal GDP growth in terms of the future?
Well, reducing the overall rhythm, pace, or absolute level of expenditures would certainly have one advantage. It would reduce the debt servicing cost, which is another item of expenditure that is rising relatively fast, due in good part to the rising level of debt, but also the increasing interest rates. So slowing down the pace of revenue, assuming that this would translate into a lower deficit, would contribute to reducing the reliance of the government on debt financing and reducing debt servicing costs.
So you're saying if the government spent less, then we wouldn't have to rely so much on nominal GDP, and therefore taxation coming into revenues? Well,
reducing expenditures could allow the government to reduce some taxes. If that's your question, then the answer is yes, that could lead to that.
Thank you. I'm now going to move on to the overview of government's digital service transformation. Your comment in the report there, or your summary, is that while the government has made improvements, there is still inconsistency in the ease of access and use of services. There is also no centralized information on the total amounts that have been spent or saved on these initiatives, as the latter is generally not tracked. Why do you think this is the case? Why do you think that in a time where we're seeing a $46 billion deficit, $6 billion greater than anticipated even back in March, we're seeing a government that isn't even making the effort to track or use data for savings within the government?
That's a good question. Why the government is not, or departments are not tracking that information? For example, the progress they are making towards digitizing the client or citizen services and the potential savings that are derived from this increased digitization is, in my opinion, a missed opportunity to track what is potentially a good story when the government is digitizing services from end to end, because it can lead to substantial savings. For example, processing a tax return electronically costs significantly less than processing that manually, or processing an application, whatever the system is or the process is. Doing that end to end electronically costs significantly less than doing that in person or through call centers. But the government doesn't seem to be tracking these savings, certainly not to a significant extent.
In the AG report this morning, a third party has estimated that to modernize the systems will take between $2.7 and $3.4 billion. Would you agree with this estimate, yes or no?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the cost of updating.
I'm afraid we'll have to take that I don't know as an answer for now.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair.
Zouari for 6 minutes, please.